Hi everyone, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to my Sunday live stream where we talk about photography. And let me just ask everyone if the audio is working okay. You can hear me okay, it doesn't sound weird. And of course, the video and the chat here over by the side. I got a lot of the streaming issues sorted out, so I think anyway. And I tell you, I was watching a stream uh, yesterday. And I'm not the only one, obviously, right? But even more experienced channels, right? Or people that are uh you would think would have it down, right? Even they had issues. It was a stream. I forget the name of the channel. I never seen the channel before. He has 100,000 some subscribers, but uh it was him and Gerald Undone and another two other creators after that. I can't remember their names either. Uh, basically ranting about the YouTube reviewers and kind of and about the Panasonic S9. So if you're a YouTuber creator and you're online, eventually you're going to get asked to review products and they'll send them to you for free, etc. I mean, you guys know the whole thing. And and they were complaining about that or trying to justify it, whatever. But yeah, and then all of a sudden, you know how it is, right? The algorithm starts spitting out all of these videos to you that are related to that topic. And and recently, remember like a couple months ago, excuse me, there was everybody, what were they ranting about a couple of months ago? Oh, everybody's quitting YouTube. About these big channels shutting down, and they're not burned out necessarily, but it was, I don't know, whatever reason. There was I got bombarded with those videos about everybody quitting. And now it seems like we're going to get bombarded with videos about people ranting about the entire business side of running a YouTube channel, assuming you run it as a business. And you guys know I don't generally run my YouTube channel as a business. I get offers for products, and I've kind of God, I've been turning down so many lately, and I feel it's crazy because it's part gas, right? It's like, ooh, I can get this free thing, whatever it is, and I just have to crank out like a 8 or 10 minute video about it. And time-wise, it doesn't make any sense, right? It might be $100, $200 product, maybe even $500, right? Whatever it is. And suddenly, uh, you're dumping 40 to 60 hours at least reviewing that product. At least I do, because I have to go out in the field and test it, depending what it is. But generally, it takes a while. It takes a couple of weeks to put it all together. Spend a couple hours a day here and there. Uh, but yeah, it's so I've been rejecting a lot of reviews because I guess it was last year, the fourth quarter. I decided, I need to kind of put my dues in and start doing reviews of these things that people ask me to review, and then eventually this will lead up to um, getting nicer things to review, right? And again, it's part of CAS. It's like, man, free lens, free light, free tripod, whatever, right? Uh, but yeah, I got burned out pretty quick this year because I've done 15 reviews or something this year, two or three a month, right? For the last 5 months. And man, yeah, I got burned out pretty quick, more or less, right? And there's other channels been doing this for years. So I'm still gonna do them. I like to do the lenses, uh, particularly for the I'm getting requests to do Sony lenses because now I guess word got out I have a Sony camera. But, you know, they're not making these mounts, they're not making them for Micro Four Thirds cameras, these third party, you know, 7 Artisans, TT Artisans, Britain Star, all these guys. They have Micro Four Third mounts, a lot of them are manual focus, and there's a couple here and there with autofocus, but for the most part, they're all getting released on Sony and Nikon and Fuji, right? And, but I haven't seen like a really a new autofocus lens for Micro Four Thirds because let me tell you, when you can get like I just did that Viltrox, I think it was a 56 millimeter APS-C lens, which can easily be adapted to Micro Four Thirds. What is it, $159 for an f1.8 56 millimeter? And there was a 26 or 27 millimeter f1.8, like for $129. I can't even remember now what the focal length was. I think it was a 27 millimeter, uh, $129, and they are decent lenses. They're really decent. They autofocus well. The sharpness is really more than adequate. I mean, certainly for the price, they're very sharp considering. And, you know, if they made these a Micro Four Thirds, uh, that would be so awesome, you know? We just need that. The only challenge with Micro Four Thirds is, you know, because of the crop, you have to have fairly wide angle lenses. So 27 is a little bit tight. It's a nice portrait lens, but you know, we need to see like you know, 20, 17, 15, like in that range. Because currently the Leica 15 millimeter, the Olympus 17 millimeter, you know, they're $300-400 on the used market and double that brand new, right off the shelf. So if they started coming out with like sub $200 lenses, oh my God, that would be so freaking awesome. I mean, for the community in general, um, assuming they hold up with the same sort of image quality that I've been seeing for the other mounts. Because, you know, I'm testing these on 40 megapixel Fujifilm, 60 megapixel Sony, and it's like these things are awesome. You know, for the money. So I have one lens lined up for next week, probably June 1st or 2nd. I'll have it out, and then I have two more coming in. Uh, Probably be released mid to late June, and but they're all Sony mounts, and it's great for Sony users. But you know, I you know the problem that I love the lenses, right? But the problem is it makes me go out and shoot with my Sony and Fuji cameras, which are fine cameras, but I much prefer shooting like my Pen F or my OM1, etc. And that said, I do also want to talk about uh, a little bit about, you know, because it's such big news, right? The new releases, the S9, the Leica Deluxe 8, and what my thoughts are. I made a little community post about it. You know, long story short, you know, I'm not that excited about the camera. It's not for me, but I have to qualify that statement a little bit more than what I made in the post. So if you haven't been to my community tab, there's some great comments on that post as well. Because I didn't want to make a whole video about the S9. It's just going to get lost in the hundred other S9 opinion videos. Because at this point, it's all everybody's opinion and not speculation, but opinion, because nobody's had the camera for more than a minute, you know? So it's like, how can you really talk about the camera yet with any uh, authority, so to speak, or experience? So there's that. But let me catch up on who's here. I see the usual suspects. Where's my chat window? Here it is. Oh my goodness, so many people. Zoltan, good to see you. And Roger and Marcia, awesome. I'm so happy you guys come back every week. I really appreciate it. It makes me feel good that there's regulars here that enjoy coming back and seeing me every week. It tells me that, I'm not boring people to tears, I hope. I mean, I watch other streams and they're so good, like, I always point out Robin Wong streams are so good. I don't know how he just kinda he got up to speed very quickly and just is like, way up there already. And then, uh, and then there's streams with, not camera related, other streams I've watched time to time, and they'll have thousands of people online live when, during the stream, right? I'm lucky to get 1,000 views on a stream, lifetime, never mind during the stream having thousands of people. But, uh, yeah, so let's see, Marsha, yes, and Jack, good to see you, Brian Phillips, and oh, Dave Tellett, yes, I do wanna talk about the LX100 Mark II, uh, because David Tellett let me borrow his, like, long-term loan, so to speak, so I've been really enjoying that camera, more than I thought, but I'm gonna share some thoughts on that too. Bob O'Neill, John Thomas, John Allen, Plato, Thomas, Jeff Painter, Darko, you guys are all awesome. Wayne and Robin Wong. Speak of the devil, Robin, how are you? So good to see you here. You're so good at your streams. I'm just I'm a little jealous a little bit, but not envious. It's a difference, right? Because we all need to be our own person, and we are who we are, right? We can't change that. Oh, and the audio's good. That's good. Um, I've been talking for like 10 minutes, and I I didn't even check the audio, but you guys are good. Thank you. And let's see. Um, and if you guys have any questions, uh, don't hesitate to ask them. Hopefully, I don't miss them. It's easy to miss on on the chat section sometimes, but if I don't get to your question, like if I got to somebody else's question before yours, that means I missed it. So you need to ask it again. And I'll always do my best. You guys ask a lot though. Um, and let's see. Marco is here. Good to see you. And Dave Johnson, Ken Cox. Wow, lots of good. Uh, oh, Ken, I added one of your fireworks images. Okay. Yeah, yeah. I think did you just send fireworks? I thought it was an astro type picture. I can't remember. My memory is so bad. It's amazing I get along as well as I do. And then Dave says, just saw your pick edit on MU40. Oh, oh. Yeah, I go onto the forums, and I participate in the photo editing challenges every week or almost every week. It's good practice for me, and you just get bragging rights if you win. There's no money or anything involved, but it's a lot of fun to see what other people do with the edits, and there's some amazing, amazing edits in there. Uh, you know, I probably 1 out of every 10 times I might win, one. But what I submitted this week. Let's see. Let me see if I can just show you. I want to share it with you just in case you guys don't know. Uh, MU40. Oh, it's. Let me go to. Oh, that's weird. It's not refreshing. What if I go to the. Oh, no, I got the right screen. There we go. Uh, yeah, if you go to MU43, post-processing challenge over here. So what they do is someone will submit the original raw file here, right? In this case, it's Zeus. And this was a really interesting picture. And then, wow, hold on, I gotta fix the image. 1 second. It is way overexposed for some reason. No, that's not helping. Well, anyway, here's sorry, it's I don't know why it's so bright. Let me try it on the other screen. Um, oh, there we go. That looks better. Okay, so here's the original image. And then the one I submitted, and you can see there's some great edits here, right? Um, I love this one here. Who did this one? BDR. Yeah. And there's a black and white. Um, let me 1 second. There's another one. Um, Mine is in here. So, oh, there's mine. So that's mine. I did some AI, right? Generative AI. So I added this sort of I wanted it to be a moat, right? Like, but anyway, there's a stream here in front of this building, and then I added this ivy around the building on the side. Then I threw this plane in there, and I did a sky replay. Anyway, so that's just to give you an idea. So I'm in there all the time. Um, and Marco, good to see you. Sneaking in the back door, Clint Johnson, and let's see. Hello, Robin, everyone. Just stopping in to say hi. Oh, hey, John. How are you? I really appreciate your support, John. John sends me a small donation time to time, and it really helps me out a lot. And then let's see. Robin has a comment here. I'm sad Matty Salanto, ex-Luminous ambassador, massive Panasonic supporter, was completely ignored and was not invited to Japan. Oh, really? He wasn't invited. Wow. Yeah, Gerald talked about that in one of his videos recently. Normally I wouldn't watch a video like that because I'm just not into these rant videos because people just get hyped up on some topic and then all of a sudden it's like the worst thing and it's going to destroy YouTube and you go down that rabbit hole and then a year later, everything's fine. Micro Four Thirds is dead. 5 years later, 6 years, everything is fine. Anyway, yeah, that is. So what Gerald was saying is that Lumix is punitive in that if you don't toe the line, right, they don't invite you. Something along those lines. You can watch Gerald's video on that, and I get it. There's that as a when you get in the circle, whatever, because this is how business works. It's at a corporate level, it's all a numbers game, right? Quarter by quarter, at least here in the US, quarter by quarter, it's a numbers game. They do everything they can to meet the numbers for their shareholders, meaning they need to show profitability or minimize losses. So, really an extreme example of this is like towards the end of a quarter, they will lay off, if it's a big company, hundreds, if not thousands of people at the end of the quarter so that their books look good. And then they rehire them the next quarter, you know, or 2 quarters. You know what I mean? Uh, I mean, that's just how it is. But anyhow, so yeah, with Lumix, it seems like if you say anything that is that just gives a bad impression. It seems like they're a little bit weary of inviting you back or having you look at their products, etc. I don't know, but when I say you're in that circle, meaning like when I started doing reviews online, I guess my videos got the attention of somebody, Seven Artisans, whoever, right? whatever distributors, because sometimes it's not the manufacturer directly, it's a distributor that is making money off of me. Um, because they'll get paid to get videos created, and then I'll make a video in exchange for the product, but then they're probably getting paid 5 times that, right? Where I should be charging for my time. But anyway, so I get in this circle, and then they tell, so I don't know how what the channels are, but 7 artisans will say, "Hey, Rob did a great review," uh, and they'll contact TT artisans, and TT artisans will say, "Okay, yeah, I'll reach out to Rob." And then TT artisans will reach out to say, GVM, right? All these guys know each other, right? They're all networking together. They go to the same big conventions and everything that they have all over the world. Uh, and they develop these through networking, they develop these relationships, and they share, right? Uh, other good contacts or other good ways to market their products. So I got into that circle, and now I'm getting inundated with reviews, and I've been turning them down. 2 or 3 every week I have to turn down that are photography related. Never mind, I get several every day for products that are not related to photography. Uh, crap, not crap, but just nobody cares. I don't need what was one? It was some kind of I can't even remember. I think it was a security system or something. Um, and usually I just respond, "Thanks." It's not, I'm not interested. Um, so yeah, that is ridiculous. Maddie is I have so much respect for my peers here, right, in the Micro Four Thirds community that are the not just my viewers. A lot of you are awesome, and have a lot of experience, and that's why I'm so flattered when you leave these very kind comments about my channel, and then once I get to know you a little better, either through email or sometimes do these conference calls. Uh, you guys are no joke. I mean, you guys are legit photographers. You're either DPs, like directors of photographies, like Jeff, or I was chatting with somebody that worked for National Geographic. It's like, don't ask me their names though. I can't remember. Uh, and I wouldn't tell you anyway, unless they're in the chat and they want to just say, "Oh, that's me." But nobody likes to be we're not generally braggers, right? And most of us are very humble and grateful for the things that we have and the things we've done, and we can be proud of those things. But anyhow, uh, yeah, Maddie always just he's really one of the best. Uh, he's one of the best photographers in my of my peers that I have here. Um, anyway, I think so. Anyway, I connect with his photography when I see it. I know what story he's trying to tell. I understand what his photography is about. I know a lot of times his photo walks are just snapshots. But when you see some of his and I can't point out a specific video, but I've seen some videos of his where I was so impressed by the work that he published on his channel or on his Instagram that I'm like, yeah, this guy is legit. He's a really good photographer, and he knows his stuff because when he tells you things about a product, because he's doing a lot of reviews too, right? Uh, he doesn't waste time with test charts, and he just goes out and uses it and tells you, and you can get a good feel for if this is worth spending your money on or not, right? So, if you guys, I'm trying to hold on. So if you guys aren't familiar with Maddie Salanto's channel, you should check it out. But I imagine all of you are, right? um, yeah, Maddie's always been a strong Lumix supporter, and all of us as photographers appreciate um, a good camera. Something that has, you know, it's a well designed device or machine or however you want to call it, piece of technology. When something is well implemented and executed well, like I think the entire Olympus lineup, for the most part, it's very well designed, very well implemented. Execution has been awesome. Their marketing department, on the other hand, is questionable, right? But when it comes to the products themselves, they really do such a good job that the kind of experience I have when I shoot my Olympus cameras versus shooting my other brands, um, there's really no comparison in my opinion. Somehow my brain connects with the Olympus system from the very first time I bought the EM5 Mark II back in 20, I think it was 2015 or 2016, whenever I bought that camera. And like 30 days later, I bought a Pen F at full price, right? Because I was so impressed with the M10 Mark II, which I paid like 600 bucks and I got two lenses with it. I dropped another 1200 bucks on a Pen F 30 days later, uh, with no lens, right? um, because it just I connected with it right away. And then over the years, and I've only been shooting 10 years now. And over the years, I've come to appreciate more and more just how good the Olympus OM system cameras are, all the way up to the new OM1. Now, I haven't gotten the Mark II. I'm gonna skip the Mark II. Uh, it's just very incremental, and the improvements or things that they have in it wouldn't benefit my photography really. Uh, and plus, I spent a boatload of money on that Sony and Fuji system. Yeah. Anyway, um, it's a big sigh, it's like I just can't, gas is just terrible. It just makes you do things that make no sense. Nothing wrong with the cameras. I actually like the Fuji quite a bit, but I didn't need it, you know. Anyway, let's see. Gordon's here. Hey Gordon. Yeah, Robin and I have done we do the annual live stream. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't mind doing another pair up. I have to, we have to come up with a topic though and stuff. But all of my peers are always welcome to reach out to me anytime and say, Rob, let's do a stream together. If it's Robin or Peter, Maddie, Emily's, the two Emily's, or any creator for that matter. There's another guy. His name is Grant. He's younger. He's a younger guy, really into Panasonic. He has a lot of energy, right? And I've never had him. And the Micro Four Thirds guy. Uh, Anytime you guys want to come on, just shoot me an email and say, Rob, let's get together, next week or the week. I don't need a lot of notice, right? Because my streams, literally, I sit down and just turn the camera on and just jibber jabber. uh, I would need about a week's notice if you want to come on the stream as a guest. Um, so I can outline, because those of you that have been on my stream before, I send a nice outline of the topics and the pacing of the stream beforehand, so everything goes as smooth as possible. Um, let's see. In fact, even during the stream, I have a link that you can use, and I can bring you in live instantly. It doesn't even have to be planned. Uh, I did that one year, one time where I put the link down and then I had some of you guys, my viewers here, actually come in the stream live with me and just talk about whatever. I can't remember what it was. I've done that before. Lori's here. Good to see you. And why did is this what I don't understand? My chat jumped all the way back up to the top. Let me where did I leave off? Somewhere with Maddie, right? Give me a second here. Okay, 9:41. Man, it's been 20 minutes. I jibber jabbered for 20 minutes about Maddie. Seriously though, that's ridiculous. But Emily got to go, right? Microport nerds. She's always a glass half full kind of person, right? Anything could happen, and she's like, "This is wonderful." You know, I love her. She just makes me so happy. Kind of like Robin. Um, they're both so positive and full of life and energy that you can't help but smile and just feel better about life when you watch their videos. Um, and I think this might be a question here. I put a BLX battery for my OM1 on the charger instead of the charger shutting off, it kept blinking. Does that mean the battery charges only to 60? Oh, that's weird. Uh, it should only take I mean, I don't know what charger you're using exactly, but, uh, I leave my yeah, you're saying it never goes off, so I'm assuming you probably left it on overnight and you came back and it's still that that doesn't make any sense. I guess if you put it in your camera, what does the camera say it's using? So what I would do is probably, use that battery until it's drained and empty again and, charge it again, and if you've done that already and it still does that, it sounds like the battery's dead. Not dead, but dying, and I wouldn't use it anymore. Uh, but my batteries, they've both my batteries are still in good shape. I've never had that problem. Now, with generic batteries, I have had problems, uh, but mine is kind of opposite. It charges very quickly, and then it dies very quickly, so it lost its total capacity, so it doesn't take long to get it to a full charge. And then um, it dies. But if you're using the original Olympus charger and original Olympus battery, they have those extra pins, right? That detect temperature internally in the battery. It detects the battery's actual temperature and also communicates the charging state. So, uh, yeah, there's probably something wrong with that battery. That's not normal. Nandarko says, "Here's the story. I bought a $30 Kodak Z99 bridge camera, Snyder lens on it, and 12 megapixel super awesome images, even in JPEG 30." But yeah, I know, right? I mean, it's just shocking how good cameras are for the last 10, 20 years. I was shooting, what's the oldest camera I shot with recently? Um, gosh, I was gonna say my Fujifilm Pocket, Digicam, but I shot with something more recently. Oh, my LX5. The Panasonic LX5. When did that come out? Um, it says here released or announced 2010. Holy crap. So that camera is 14 years old and it still takes amazing pictures. But I wish I could it should be a $30 camera being that old, but I paid less than 200 and that's a good deal. But it's crazy. Used prices are crazy. And let's see. Robin's so good. Even in my chat section, he's busy. He's like really active, just like on his live streams. I appreciate that though. And let's see. Camera Combo says the Deluxe 8 is a little concerning because I see no mention of PDAP. I'm confused about that. It seems like a misstep if that's the case. Yeah, okay, so let's get into the S9 and Deluxe 8. One second. Let me just check. I think there's another comment here. Gordon says enjoyed your community post on the S9. Most folks seem to have had negative view on some specs, but actually I enjoyed using it. Uh Not you, I'm sorry, but actually, not a camera for everyone, but it has its uses. Okay, so in my community post, I mentioned uh, some of the limitations, right, that they had to impose to make it the size that it is. The biggest one being the recording limits: 10 minutes on 6K, 15 minutes on 4K, 20 minutes on 1080, full HD, and then no mechanical shutter. And unfortunately, it's not using a stack sensor. The readout speed is slow, so there's no opportunity to use flash. Because so hence the hot shoe is not really a hot shoe, it's a cold shoe. There's no contacts to attach an external flash. And also no EVF. And what was the other thing? Um, those were kind of the big things for me, right? So when it comes to the video and the hot shoe, right? Flash. Those aren't necessarily deal breakers for me. I went and I looked at all my videos from 2022. I didn't look at 2023, but in 2022, easily 99% of my videos were 10 minutes or less in actual raw that I recorded, in the camera. Most of them were 2 minutes, 5 minutes, in that range. And partially that's due to the fact that I prune a lot of the videos off my hard drive. So if they were big, long files, I usually delete them because they take up so much space on my hard drive. So I don't know. I don't know if that's why I'm not seeing that many long form videos on my hard drive. Because I know more recently, I haven't pruned like this month's videos off my hard drive yet. Those videos are all pretty long. I mean, there's a few here, 5, 10 minutes, but a lot of them are 20, 30. One was 38 minutes. Um, I was looking at some of my client videos, those are like 30 plus minutes in 4K. So I could work around that though, right? If I know the time limit is 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, I can work around that in my workflow. So it's not really a deal breaker. Okay, no hot shoe, no flash, right? I use LED lighting a lot now. I don't really need flash for do my portrait stuff or even in the field when I'm doing macro, I just can hold an LED light or set them up. I don't need flash that much. I like flash because, it's a lot more powerful than LED lighting for the size, right? I can carry a little, Godox V1, and that's like a 500 or 1,000 watt LED. You've seen a 500-watt LED is huge. Never mind the power supply, but you can go out with a little flash with a battery and you're good, right? But for the kind of photography I do outdoors, macro, if I do close up and macro, I can get away with just using handheld LED. They're even making portable LED lighting powerful enough to use outdoors on a cloudy day, not necessarily in bright sun, but it's getting there. And for the times that I need more lighting for my photography, that's when that limitation would be a problem. If I want to do portraits outdoors with flash, when it's relatively bright out, because what you have to do is you put an ND filter on or use high speed sync. But typically you would use a ND filter to bring the ambient light down, and then you have to crank your flashes up to full power. There's no way an LED light that you can put in your bag is going to work in those situations. So that's problem number one. For me, the typical market that this camera is marketed for, I guess, probably 99% of people don't use flash to begin with. So why go through the trouble of, anyway. uh, but for me, that's a problem, right? Uh, and then what was the other thing? Flash, no flash, time limit. So yeah, those two are not really deal breakers, right? No EVF. That's not necessarily a deal breaker either, because I have several cameras with no EVF, right? My TG5, my XZ1, my LX5. None of them have EVFs, and I can get by. I get by easier with the tilt screen, right? Like on my XZ1 or no, XZ2, I'm sorry, the XZ2, I can tilt the screen up, and that makes a world of difference for me. Having just a flat, a fixed LCD on the back, it's a little bit awkward sometimes. So those three things, right? Individually, individually for me are not deal breakers. But when you put all those together, all of a sudden I have a very, excuse me, all of a sudden I have a very handicapped camera or a very limited camera. Uh, when you put all those things together, because I can work around those things individually for the most part. Almost any situation I can run into, I can solve that problem, whatever the limitations are on that camera. But when you put that all together, and then at that price point, I think the price point's a little high. Because when you look at a camera like the Canon R8, the Nikon Z5, uh, even the Nikon Z6 now is on sale, right in that price range. Z6 Mark II, right? Uh, and on and on and on. Fujifilm X-T5. These are all cameras Panasonic's own S5 II. These are all cameras within, spitting distance in terms of price of this camera that has all of these limitations. So it's more of a form over function type thing. Do you really want a camera that small and, to use? And if you do, you can probably work around those issues, right? And it'll be a great camera for you. But I'm in the position that I have so many cameras, n- you know, I don't, all of those things, all those limitations put together just are too limiting. uh, but that said, I know the sensor because I had the S5 before, takes amazing images. Really nice. The L mount glass. That's the other thing, the lenses. They need to start making more compact lenses, right? They're coming out with an 18 to 40 that looks pretty small. And if it's reasonably sharp on a 24 megapixel sensor, I'd be content with that, even though it's like an f4 to f8 or something, some ridiculous number. That 28 millimeter or 26 millimeter f8 lens that they're cranking out with it right now on launch, that's kind of a joke. Uh, I mean, look at the Nikon 28 millimeter f2, or is it a 2.8? That's pretty pancake for the Z mount. That's what they should have come out with, is something like that. Autofocus, reasonably, sharp, reasonably decent lens optically. For the price point, it's like and Canon has some very nice compact 2.8s as well. 16, 20, 24, 28, whatever. They have some really nice pancakes too. For cheap, 300 bucks. That's where L mount needs to go next, because the lenses they have now are optically, for the money, really at 10 times the price. It's hard to get a lens as good as the Lumix glass. The Lumix L mount system, from Panasonic, and I'm sure Sigma's very good too, but I know the Lumix glass, because I only bought Lumix glass from when I had my S5, optically were amazing, and they delivered the best images that camera could possibly resolve. So once they start coming out with some pancake lenses, I will probably get back into the L mount system. I'm tempted to do it now. I want an S1R so bad. I miss my S1R, even though I'd probably never use it. It's so big and heavy, but I love that camera actually, and it's the only camera that I regret selling because I've traded in a lot of stuff. Uh, like on the Olympus side, I got rid of my EM1 Mark III. I don't miss it at all because I have the OM1, right? Uh, but the S1, when I got rid of my S5 and got the S1, I missed that. So I think a lot of people really will be fine with an S9 if they want that size camera. Because most younger people they don't use EVFs, right? They're used to their phone. They don't use EVFs. Hardly anybody uses flash, which is a mistake. People should, if you're a photographer, you need to get into flash photography. Seriously. But most people that this camera's targeted for, they're not going to use flash. Probably 99.999%, right? Are going to worry about flash. They're gonna mount an LED light on their camera. And then the record limits, like I said, most of when I looked at my videos on my hard drive from 2022, all that's left, because I did prune a lot of videos out, all that's left are the 5-10 minute videos. So it's well within the recording limits of what that camera can do. So I think, you know, Panasonic kind of nailed it with respect to what to keep and what not to keep in that camera because they kept all of the video features, open gate, 4K, 8K, whatever. I'm not really a video guy, but apparently it has everything the S5 does, which is supposed to be amazing. And where am I going with this? So they kept everything in there, every feature that sensor can do. They didn't handicap the sensor at all, right? Whatever technology they have on the software firmware side, they put into that camera, right? High res shot mode, five axis image stabilization, um, and again, all the video features, all the photo features, stacking, 4K photo, everything Panasonic has is crammed into that camera. It's not crippled at all in that respect. So yeah, I would say 80% of the time I'm shooting an electronic shutter anyway. Right? I use mechanical shutter enough that I would kind of miss it if I didn't have it. But again, the market that camera is targeted for, they're not going to care mechanical, electronic. They use electronic shutters all the time on their cell phones anyway. So the question then becomes, the S9 is pretty amazing camera uh, for the market that it's going to, but what's it competing against, right? There's a lot of competition in that price point, and that's where I think if they were maybe $300 cheaper, if it was like a $12.99 camera, right? $12.99, and they had a $300 28 millimeter 2.8 or 20 millimeter. I guess for vlogging you would need a 20 to 24 millimeter 2.8 for 300 bucks. So you can get into a system for like 1600 with the lens. Yeah, that would be, I think that would be very, very competitive with anything else out there. Uh, and I guess the LUT feature is amazing, right? That being able to create your own LUTs, because the LUTs in the app, I don't know what the app does, but I've created LUTs on my videos, I never use them. I'm fine with just 1080p, 1080p for life, man. But the LUTs are for color and stuff. I just shoot a natural color profile. full auto mode when I do videos. So, but when I was doing LUTs, you can get pretty sophisticated and dial in exactly what you want, right? It's not a simple, like in the Pen F, it has a very rudimentary uh, colors, color adjustability. It's very, very basic. You can do a lot with just a little, but it's not a LUT. A LUT is full control over the final image. And, once you set up 3 or 4 of your favorite LUTs that you've designed yourself or you found someone else made already, which is gonna be all free on this platform, uh, I think that's gonna be awesome, and that's the way LUTs should be and presets. Presets and LUTs generally should just be free, right? Just, what's the word? What do they call it when software is free? Freeware, I guess? I mean, if people wanna make money off the LUTs, that's okay, set up your own website and do something that makes sense. If you think you make money at it, go ahead, but, uh yeah, I think most of that stuff should be shared freely, and the Olympus Pen F, actually, I can share custom settings with everyone, right? If I develop a certain color setting or recipe, I guess they call it, I can save that to in Workspace and send you the file, and you can load that onto your Pen F, and you can have this. I thought about doing that actually at one time. Um, it's been in the back of my mind for years now. So if it's been years, so I may never get to it, but I want to. I want to create some free profiles or recipes for the Pen F. Okay, so that's the S9. I'm going to talk about the Deluxe 8 next. David Crooks is here. My goodness. Hi, David. That was a great meetup. Yeah, yesterday I did mostly flash photography yesterday. Man, I was trying to teach one person, but I invited everybody to come if they want me to, they want to learn how to use flash. So it's but I David, we need to set up something more formal though. Uh, so maybe we can talk later today or during the week. Set up a formal class that I can teach. And if you guys are local, I do these classes for free, so you're welcome to join. Um, oh, hey, Lori, just getting started with photography, here to learn. Maybe this isn't for beginners. Um, no, this is just a community type thing here in the live streams where we just talk about photography. But I don't know what camera you have. I assume it's an Olympus camera, but uh, you know, there's there's some great tutorials and content from myself and Robin Wong. Uh, and if you do Panasonic, Matty Salanto, and Peter Forsgaard has a great library of videos for beginning photographers. So you need to watch a few from various creators like the ones I've mentioned, and see who connects with you the best and that makes sense to you, right? Because my pacing is relatively slow. You could probably watch my videos at 1.5x or 2x speed and get through them just fine. Uh, Robin, I have to slow down because he talks so fast, but, uh, yeah, there's a lot of content out there, but people in the peers that I know, Robin Wong, Maddie Salanto, Peter Forsgaard, even Jimmy Chang, actually, he's a more practical type, uh, uh, content, right? Where he's using the camera a lot, but not so much deep dive into the menus and settings. But to learn basic photography, it's don't overthink it, right? Today's cameras do everything so well, it's pretty much automatic. You can shoot in auto mode and focus on the craft itself, the art of photography, and the kind of images you want to capture and start developing your own style. But if you want to learn how to control the exposure in your camera to for creative effect, that's when it can get a little tricky. But the easiest thing to do is um, basically put it into most cameras. If you just put it in the program mode or P mode, right, on the mode dial, you can still dial in exposure compensation, which allows you to brighten or darken the image. So if you take a picture and it's too bright or parts of it are too bright, you can make it a little darker just by dialing it in. And it goes and it's on a scale, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can dial in +1, +2, and then there's fractions in between. It's usually in thirds. So 1 and a third, 1 and 2/3, 2, 2 and a third. So you just brighten or darken the image to taste in full program mode. And then if you want to advance beyond that, uh, and start learning about controlling aperture and shutter speed. I have a few videos on that. So if you search my channel for uh, shutter shutter mode for beginners, aperture for beginners, something like that. I have some very generic tutorials as well, and they're long form. They're like 30, 40-minute videos teaching about shutters, shutter speed, aperture, ISO, things like that. So but I don't know where you're starting from. I don't know what your experience is, so hopefully I didn't bore you there. And then here's one. Rob, is there an adapter to use my Olympus Micro Four Third? No, there's not. Using Micro Four Third lenses on XT3, there's not any that I know of. Because it's physically impossible, uh, because the distance between the mount on the camera and the sensor on the camera is, say, this much, right? And if the distance between the sensor and the mount, they call it the flange distance, is shorter on the Fuji, then they might make an adapter so you can fit Micro Four Third lenses onto the Fuji. But the fact that it's been this long, right? Fuji and Olympus have been making cameras for 20 years and they still don't have an adapter. That tells me that the flange distance was not enough that they could put an adapter in. For example, I recently saw, I guess they're making an adapter so you can put Canon lenses, Canon RF lenses on Nikon Z mount. I believe that's what the conversion was. Both are mirrorless cameras. So that tells me that the flange distance on Nikon Z is short enough, right, on the Nikon that they can add an adapter with a little bit of space. Usually they're really thin rings, just a little bit of space to adapt the Canon RF glass onto it. And if it's autofocus, they need to have room for the electronics and stuff too. But yeah, it's been too long. If they haven't made one now, that it's not going to happen. Um, and let's see. Wow, I keep falling further and further behind. And Roger says, Rob, just watched a YouTube video on not always shooting 3x2 format, using other formats, 1x1, 4x5, etc. to view in the EVF allows you to frame your shots better at start, even though RAW captures it all. Yes, I do that very regular. I shoot in the format that ultimately I'm going to crop to anyway. So you lose megapixels in terms of, the final image, not in the raw file. The raw file is still the full whatever sensor, but yeah, I shoot in square format a lot, and I just like the square format because I like the look of the square format, but also if I want to do a vertical shot, I don't have to turn the camera, right? I can always have the camera this way, and that's why I normally shoot in square format because I don't like to do verticals or portrait mode type shots. Uh, and what I found in my photography is I ended up cropping anyway a lot of the images. The only exception to that is like when I'm doing landscapes and things, then I like the wide format, right? Um, and then usually I'm taking multiple shots and stitching them together in post anyway. So whatever cropping thing that I set in the camera won't make any difference. But for my everyday shooting, I typically shoot um, in square. On my full frame camera, my Sony, I actually shoot in 4 by 3 a lot because I'm just used to that format. And again, I know I'm losing pixels ultimately for my composition, but it's no big deal. That thing has 60 megapixels anyway, you know, which is like probably 50 more than I need. Uh, but yeah, absolutely. I think composing images in the format in your camera and not doing it in post-processing is a very good exercise in improving your photography, right? Because you have to think about the composition more and not just shoot the same way you always shoot, right? Because when something changes, your brain is forced to adapt to it, and so it becomes a learning process. Yeah, gas is bad. It's true. Oh, Craig. Oh, over at E6, I haven't seen that video, but yeah, Craig is awesome. Craig is really good. Yeah, I like Craig. I used to watch him all the time. Um, so I agree with you about OMS marketing. There are many small improvements on OM1 Mark II which have just not been mentioned. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. I mean, anybody that has the Mark II, congratulations. I'm a little jealous, but for all the reasons, mostly financial, I just can't take the Mark II. Money no object, I would have one, but I really can't afford to keep spending money on cameras when I don't have to. And Fuji prices are crazy. Even the real old, I know. Fuji is just, I don't get it. I don't get it with the used cameras. And then now my chat jumped all the way back up to 930 just when I started. Why does it do that? I agree with you about, okay, I'm back there. Yeah, Vaughn says the lack of EVF on the S9 is tough. Yeah, especially as someone mentioned, if you wear glasses, it's really hard not to have an EVF. And I much prefer an EVF than no EVF, like, but depends on the what, I don't know, it just depends. If because like the XZ2, not Dave gave me a viewfinder for it, but I used to shoot with that without, excuse me. Oh, I used to shoot with that. I only slept like 4 hours. I used to shoot with that um with no EVF all the time, and I was fine with it. And you get used to it when you're in the field, but my eyes are so bad now. I have to hold the camera out this far to make changes in the menu, unless I bring my glasses with me. So that's a little bit of a problem for me. So Emily just crossed 9,000 subscriber, and I was lucky enough to win the light. Oh, what light did she have some giveaway? That's cool. I didn't know that. Huh. Unrelated to photography a bit, but for storage of media, do you feel SSDs are safe enough long term for archival storage? Yes. I've been using an SSD for about 5 years now, on my other computer, and it still is fine. Now, archival, you're talking about probably 10, 20 years. Uh, I don't see why not. But that said, um, I'm not the right person to ask. I haven't used an SSD for 20 years, right? I would do some research on that. I can't answer that one, unfortunately. But I know my SSD, but all electronic components eventually wear out, right? Uh, because especially ones that have capacitors in them, whether they're onboard SMBs, right, or uh, the Coke can style, the cylinder type style capacitors, they eventually dry out over time and explode or just pop, and you have to replace those, and you can do those. You can get that done usually for older electronics, but modern electronics, the things are so tiny now, you can't it can't be done cost effectively. But eventually, all electronics are going to die. They're not going to last forever, and I would assume that includes SSDs because they have a lot of electronics on there. Um, but I know, when I get used cameras sometimes, they'll have the SD card in them, and there'll be pictures in there from 10 years ago on the SD card, still fine. And you hear stories about that on YouTube. Sometimes a video will pop up saying, "Man, I found this camera underwater for 20 years, and I pulled the SSD card out or the SD card out, and it was fine." They got all these really interesting pictures, and then they end up finding the person that owned that camera. Some really good stories out there. So that implies to me that it seems fine, but I don't know. And Camera Comment says, I think the S9 looks cool. The problem is more that you must use Sigma lenses due to size or APS-C lenses. The 26 millimeter f8 is a joke. Yeah, that was a very curious decision. I mean, if they came out with that lens later, uh, maybe, there might be somebody that wants it, right? There's going to be people that wouldn't mind the 26 millimeter f8. There's all kinds of people out there, right? And somebody might love that lens. But to launch the camera with that lens, I think was a mistake. It just makes no sense to me. Um, but yeah, they need to come out. They need to come out with some more pancake lenses, uh, like Nikon and Canon has. They're f2.8s, I believe. But if they can come out with some pancake f2.8s, those would be perfect lenses for the S9. And John says the A7C beats the Lumix S9 is a bit smaller, in my opinion. I agree. Spec-wise, it beats the S9, probably size, weight, features, uh, but it where it comes short is in the video features that the S9 is capable of, right? Because I don't think the A7C has open gate, 422 10-bit internal, all of that stuff. I don't think the A7C has high-res shot mode. It, I guarantee it doesn't have focus bracketing, right? Like all kinds of things that it's lacking. So that's what I mean. The S9 has all of the features in terms of firmware and sensor that Panasonic has on their table. They put everything in there. They're just because of the form factor, they had to limit the video to 10 to 20 minutes, all the things we talked about. So the A7C, while I think is a better all-around camera than the S9 in every way, it's better all-around camera. Uh, there are some things about the S9 that clearly trump the A7C. Um, and if somebody's looking for those features, and those would be people like you and I, enthusiasts, camera enthusiasts, the S9 might be a better choice than A7C if we can live with the compromises that the S9 has that the A7C does not, right? The A7C is probably at least 30-minute record time, if not unlimited. I don't know what the specs are on A7C, but I know Sony, uh, the autofocus is gonna be fine even on the A7C. So, all around, if somebody came to me and said, "These 2 cameras I'm looking at, which one is a better camera?" I would say get the A7C. Not even the Mark II, but just get the A7C. It's a better all-around camera. Uh, but if somebody says, "I wanna do videos and I wanna be able to, up my game and because there are reasons to buy the S9 for certain things, but I'm the wrong person to ask because I'm not a video person. But if I was a video person and the person coming to me wanted to do video, I could articulate exactly why they would might want the S9 instead of the A7C. Oh, let's see. Yeah, magnetic drive. So that I should have mentioned, I guarantee, including if Marco's still here, there are some experts out there right here in the chat section that probably can answer your question about using hard drives as SSDs specifically as archival for archival purposes. And Marco's heading out. All right, you have a good weekend and a good week. Thanks. Thanks for coming in, Darko. It's always good to see you every week. And Jack has got to go too. Yeah, 12:30 a.m. All right. Thanks for stopping in, Jack. If you're watching later, I appreciate it. And if the SSD even has a little power supply to it, it can keep the bits from flipping. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Because SSDs, when you take the power out, I don't know what sets the bit. Anyway, we're getting too technical. I used to be a computer guy back in the day, and before SSDs were made. But when they started coming out, I kept up with it to some extent. And like for example, computer memory, like you buy a 16 gig computer, 32 gig computer. When you turn a computer off, the memory is pretty much wiped because it needs a constant state of charge to maintain what's in the memory. Now, there may be some forensic scientists out there that can extract things from your computer memory. I don't know. But hard drives, once they flip that bit from a 0 to a 1 or vice versa, it doesn't need a constant charge to keep that state at a 0 or a 1. So, a good example would be like the firmware in your camera, right? That's basically a miniature memory SSD that you update, right? Hopefully, you only have to update once or twice. Uh, but yeah, the firmware in your camera, the memory in it is kind of like a mini SSD, very, very small amount. Okay, and let's see. Thinking of A7C2 as the first full-frame mirrorless camera, superior autofocus to Lumix L mount. Sony IBIS still inferior for video though. I wouldn't sweat the IBIS, honestly, right? Even my Olympus OM1, has the best IBIS on the planet. For video, you still need to really be very, very steady, right? And hold the camera. Uh, the only way really to get steady video is with a gimbal. So I wouldn't sweat it, honestly. if you get good at walking and cutting your shots and panning properly, once you develop your just like everything in photography, video is the same. Once you develop your skill set for recording video, these other features are basically crutches. IBIS is a crutch. 422 10-bit internal video or RAW, all of these are really crutches to getting good at your craft. Once you're good at your craft and develop your skill set, you're not going to rely on these things and autofocus included, right? I mean, I love the bird tracking and all that in my OM1, but if I was really good, my skill set was very high, I would get excellent results with an EM10 Mark II, right? You know, it's not about the camera and the gear and all this technology. It's about your skill set as a photographer, or in this case, a videographer. So I wouldn't worry about the IBIS too much. I don't think there's enough difference that you're going to be able to compensate over poor skills, for video for IBIS anyway. Um, but I don't think an autofocus superior to Lumix. It is, but again, like I said, autofocus is kind of a crutch, right? Having a one, because like I said, my EM10 or let me talk about my EM5 Mark II. My EM5 Mark II, EM5 Mark III, very basic, especially EM5 Mark II, just contrast detect. I've gotten amazing images with it, on that. Because autofocus is perfectly fine because my skill set is just enough that even with contrast detect, I can do really well. I don't need the high performance autofocus systems, say a Sony. In fact, the Sony autofocus system is so because like on my A7R5, it's not I'm starting to understand it more. But when I first started using it, I was having a hard time with it. But now I'm starting to get used to what it's doing and how it's behaving. You have to kind of get used to a camera, right? And how it behaves with you as a person. Um, you have to have a relationship with your camera. You want to put it another way. And once you have a good relationship with your camera, uh, all of its benefits and pros and cons, you learn to work around the cons and you love the pros of the camera. So it bothers me when I hear people doing reviews and they're like, "Man, yeah, Sony has the best autofocus." It's like, and they'll do these side by side tests and see, I got 100 out of 100 shots in focus with the Sony, and I got 90 out of 100 sharp in focus with the whatever brand. Uh, but I'm telling you, in practice, I thought I could just turn the autofocus on in my A7R4 and um, and I'm good to go. But no, it's not. It's not like that because, uh, like I was taking pictures of my dog Ellie, and I had to delete several shots because they misfocus on the eye or misfocus completely. It was blurry. I deleted a lot of shots, and I do the same thing with my OM1, but less so because I have a good relationship with my OM1. I know how it behaves and what to expect and how to use it so that I get the best performance out of it. And I'm getting there with the Sony. I'm getting there where I'm not missing focus as much, but I mean, a little thing is like when I see a certain frame or a certain composition in my EVF and I'm looking at where to focus on that scene, I know where to focus so that the camera will focus and get focus, if that makes sense. Um, because like Robin Wong is struggling with the OM1 in his photography, and he went back to using the Mark II, EM1 Mark II, because he could never, you know, if you ask him, it's the gear, right? The gear is the problem, and I don't disagree. In fact, my testing pretty much verified Robin's problem, right? That the OM1 autofocusing system doesn't focus that great in low light. right? And the situations that he's runs into. But that's when I would not use that camera, right? Because I know it's not going to autofocus. But the Sony, I was surprised sometimes that I had to that it misfocus. I'm like, why would it misfocus on something like this? And that's because it's a little bit different than I'm not articulating this as well, so I'll stop. But yeah, the autofocus and the IBIS between these cameras, I think is very, very minute relative to you building your skill set in photography. Then these things are not important, right? So I would look at the Sony, I would look at the L mount very closely and look at the lenses because this is how I decide uh, which camera I'm going to take out. Is I look at what lens I'm going to use, and then that determines what camera I'm going to use. So look at the lenses that you can get for the L mount. And I'm going to tell you, it's safe to assume if it's an L mount S, it doesn't have to be their Pro Glass. It can be one of their regular L mount, 50 millimeter 1.8, 35, their 100 macro. Any of their glass is optically as good as anything Canon and Nikon makes, if not better, in my opinion. And certainly, equal or better than anything Sony makes. Um, at a much lower price point, and that's the key. You can get optically excellent glass in L mount for a third or maybe even half the price, right? Their 50 millimeter f1.8, their 35 1.8, their 85 1.8, I would compare that against any G Master lens from Sony, which costs 2-3 times as much. And I think honestly, okay, I would be much happier with L mount glass uh, than I am with anything that I have for my Sony or Fuji, and even Olympus to some extent. Olympus makes a basic glass too, but uh, definitely L mount I have to put at the top. So for me, what was my first full frame camera after because before that I used Nikon D750. That was really my first full frame camera, but more recently, when I wanted to get back into full frame, what did I buy? I bought a Panasonic S5, not even the Mark II. And then I got the lenses, and that's when I was sold on it. Uh, and then I got the Panasonic S1R, and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's amazing. I miss that camera. And it's not because of the camera itself, because I can get a 47 megapixel Nikon Z2, right? Get about the same megapixels I can with an S1R, but I can't get the lenses on the Nikon that I can get for the Lumix at the same price. What is Nikon's 50 millimeter 1.8? It's like 600 bucks, even on sale, and it rarely goes on sale. But the Lumix 50 millimeter f1.8, 350 bucks all day long. I bought mine for less than that when it was on sale with some other rebate or something. Out the door, delivered for less than $350, and it's an amazing piece of glass. Um, but the problem with Panasonic Lumix L mount is the A7C, you can get lots of nice compact Sigma lenses for it, right? So overall, I think the form factor right now on the A7C2 is better with the lenses that you can get for it. It's like 500 bucks for a decent lens on Sony, 5 or 600 bucks, and then up, right, to get decent lenses. But on the Lumix side, $500 or less will get you a lot of great lenses. You don't have to spend $1,000, $2,000 on a Lumix lens like you would on a Sony lens. So anyway, Um, I'm not sold on Sony myself because the lenses are so expensive. Um, and here's another comment about keeping data. Certified worm drive, 2 rate 5 NAS, and make every dump every year. That's expensive stuff, man. I mean, if I was actually cataloging and selling my photography, you know, because you never know, 10 years from now, somebody might want a picture that I took of the Potomac River for historical purposes because something has changed, right? And I need to be able to find, first of all, find that image, and then two, make sure that it didn't get corrupted or lost because of, in data, that didn't get lost in data, and having a good backup system. So there's business reasons you'd want a very sophisticated backup system. Or let's just talk about your own personal family photos, right? A lot of them are digital now. For the last 20 years, we've been shooting digital. And I've lost a lot of pictures, that I will miss. So if that's important to you, it's not that important to me. My photography is not that important, honestly, right? That I would spend all that money on it. And I'm not cataloging things for resale later. So I don't have any personal or business reasons to invest in a very sophisticated, expensive data backup and storage thing, right? Uh, but if you do and you have the money, uh, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't take my allergy medicine, so my nose is really itchy. Um, it says, Rob, you are forced to pay MSRP. What is the best lens image quality for the price? 75 to 300, 100 to 400, 300 f4, 150 to 600. Um, man, those are all very different lenses. I mean, I guarantee the best image quality is the 300 f4, but the best value is the 75 to 300. And then I would say the 100 to 400 is sharper than the 75 to 300, but it's like 4 times the price, right? And then the 150 to 600 is probably on par, I would say is equal with the 100 to 400. But then it's another $1,000 on top of that, right? So value for money, 75 to 300 all day long. But I would put the lenses in that order in terms of sharpness: 300 f4, 100 to 400, then 150 to 600. They're probably tied on the 100 and the 150 to 600. And the 75 to 300 is probably the least sharp of all of those. But it's the cheapest one by far. So I've gotten terrific images, tack sharp with that lens. Uh, so it's the best bang for the buck, but all the other lenses are sharper ultimately, but not by much. If you blind tested uh, all of those lenses, it would be hard to tell the difference, um, depending on the shot. But when you start pushing all of these lenses to their extreme, right, where you can show the difference, then what was my point? I I think the 300 f4 will come out on top every time. And Lysippus says, using DxO Pure Raw 4, seeing an outline around people. Have you noticed this? I haven't noticed it, but what you can do, so when you start to get kind of haloing, right, like outlines and haloing, turn the sharpness down. I think it default is standard. Try turning that sharpness down. I'm going to work with it some more. I've only done a few images with Pure Raw 4, so I haven't noticed it yet. I haven't really deep dived into it, but I have seen the haloing effects. So what you have to do is make sure you make sure the sharpening is turned to its lowest setting, whatever that is in Pure Raw 4. And that should minimize it, if not eliminate it. And then what other settings are in that? I can't think. I think that's the only setting that would affect the haloing, but I'll look. So I'm gonna try and develop a tutorial for Pure Raw 4, kind of like I did for Pure Raw 3. But the haloing is gonna happen in the sharpening process. Because sharpening is a very sharpening is basically adjusting contrast. Because all lenses are soft if you pixel peep hard enough. And to improve the sharpness, you're just changing the contrast. And the contrast is dictated by the frequency of the of the algorithm, right? How much difference in tone is it going to look at before it changes, makes it brighter or darker for that pixel? So if you have two pixels side by side and one pixel is white and the other pixel is gray, say perfect 18% gray, it's going to make the image look sharper. It's going to take the 18% gray and make it almost black, right? If you got two pixels side by side. So all of a sudden now the image looks sharper and the difference in sharpness is not perceptible. I'm sorry, the sharpness is just basically adjusting contrast between two pixels. You know, but if you want to make the contrast even or the image even sharper, right? How many pixels is it going to look at? And that's the frequency, right? So it might look at 10 pixels and adjust the sharpness of all 10, or it might adjust the sharpness of just 2, you know. So it's a very sophisticated algorithm. And this is when the outlining and haloing comes with sharpening. Let's see. I'm sorry, I lose placement on the chat every time. And then Ed says go with the 100 to 400, but if you're a prime guy, the 300 would be the one. Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for a super telephoto, I think the 100 to 400 would be probably the best choice for the money. Because spending 1,000 more for the 150 to 600, if you need the reach, then it makes sense, but it's a tough call. Tough call. Get the focal length that you need. Don't worry about the sharpness so much. They're all going to deliver great results. That's why I like the 75 to 300. And I skipped the 100 400. I just went with the 300 f4 prime. Because I did test the 100 to 400. And the differences are very subtle, but just enough. The main reason I got the 300 f4 is because it's an f4 and not 5.6 or higher. That difference, the difference, you know, shooting at ISO 1600 instead of ISO 3200, any gain in sharpness or difference, you know, that's the main difference in the sharpness is you have to shoot at a higher ISO with all those other lenses. And you're going to lose detail because you're shooting at higher ISOs. And that's why I went with the 300 f4. as opposed to 100 to 400, because in perfect lighting, they're probably all, like I said, in a blind test, you're not going to see really any difference between those lenses. But it's when you start to push them to their extreme in low light, and I'm shooting at 1600, and the other guy's shooting at at 3200. Who do you think is going to get the sharper image? I am, right? Because I'm at a lower ISO. So, uh, Vaughn says there's no way 150 to 400 is better just because it's more expensive. It just has more. Sorry, I didn't put a. But there's no way the 150 to 400 is better just because it's more expensive. It just has more features and a zoom. Well, the lenses are not just about the optics, right? It's also about the focusing motors, the durability, the weather sealing. There's a lot of things that goes into lenses. And then it's the finer optical qualities that lenses can correct for that cheaper lenses would not. It's also the manufacturing process and tolerances. So there's reasons lenses are a lot more expensive, right? Uh, so it's not just because, like I said, in a blind test, a lot of times you can't tell the difference between a kit lens and a pro lens, you know, because they're both working in optimal lighting and optimal conditions that don't stress the lens to its limits. But as soon as this is when we get into chromatic aberration, smearing, flaring, ghosting, you know, um, onion ringing, soap bubbles, all the defects in a lens, right? That you can possibly come up with. And then the focusing speed, because the motors, having two focusing motors instead of one, having two linear motors instead of stepping motors, having and then the spherical glass is polished on a very, very high-end polishing machine, so you don't get that onion ringing. And they use a spherical glass to make the lens a little bit lighter than it otherwise would be, because they're on top of that using a very sophisticated polishing process so that you don't get the onion ringing and other defects. And then they're using better coatings so you get less reflections inside the lens that cause the ghosting and flaring. So there's a million things in the lens, and I'm not a lens engineer by any means, but I read a lot as much as I can, uh, or learning as much as I can about lens design and manufacturing, because I'm doing all these lens reviews. So I have to at least talk about them with some some understanding of lens design. I think at least that's the approach I'm taking. Right? Is why is this lens performing the way it does? Like one of the lenses I reviewed didn't use any spherical glass. So when you look at the bokeh on that, it's smooth as butter. Because a lot of times when these cheap lenses has the spherical glass in them, that's when you start to see all this onion ringing and very busy bokeh. Like it it's it doesn't have creamy smooth backgrounds, even though it's a shallow depth of field. And the transition from in focus to out of focus is a little bit choppy, is the best way to put it. It all has to do with the manufacturing, polishing, and design of the lens. So I don't mind if lenses don't have a spherical glass in them, because you do get smoother renditions. At the same time, what's the trade-off, right? Why do people use a spherical glass when you get smoother, cleaner, premium images without it? Well, one is size and weight, right? Spherical glass makes corrections that you can't do with normal spherical glass. Uh, so you need less lenses. You can use one spherical glass instead of using three or four normal spherical glass elements. So you can make the lenses smaller and lighter, and the only trade-off is maybe some onion ringing in the out of focus areas, in the speculars in particular. And that's a fair trade-off, because most people are not trying to get a picture of speculars, right? that are out of focus. Most people are trying to get tack sharp images, and they don't have this big heavy ass lens. Um, but anyway, so that's what I'm trying to learn and understand lenses, lens manufacturing, lens design, all of these different things. So that's why when people were complaining that why did they use a full frame lens for a micro four thirds mount, the new Sigma 150 to 600, right? It's like, why didn't they just design it for micro four thirds to make it smaller and lighter? You can't. Not on a lens with that focal length and aperture. It's a very simple formula, right? The lens opening divided by the diameter of the diameter by the focal length, right? So you take the focal length divided by the diameter of the entrance point of the light, not necessarily the front element, and you get this number, and that number is the ultimately what the aperture is. So given the aperture and focal length of that lens, even if it was for micro four thirds, they can't make it any smaller. They just can't, without some other compromises. They can maybe make it shorter, right? Um, because the length, for example, the what is it? The Nikon 300 millimeter f4 PF, right? Lens. That lens is very compact, small, lightweight compared to the 300 millimeter f4 for micro four thirds. Significantly smaller and lighter. Uh, but there's a compromise, right? It's just as sharp as the 300 millimeter f4 for all intents and purposes, but the trade-off is in the background blur. Because that lens uses a Fresnel type design, or I'm sorry, I said Fresnel. That's what the PF stands for, I guess. The F is for the Fresnel part. The bokehs, if you want to see the worst onion ringing in history, shoot with a Nikon 300 millimeter f4 PF and have some speculars in the background of your subject. And it's very, very distracting. And this is what I mean about getting to know and having a relationship with your camera. I should add lens to that. So, yeah, so every lens with the current technology that they're using, if they make a lens smaller, lighter, more compact, like these pancake lenses for full frame lenses, full frame cameras, there's compromises somewhere. They're excellent lenses. Like I said, when you use them for general purpose, you'll get just a nice image as any pro lens. But it's when you start pushing the lenses to their extremes, like putting it on a 47 or 60 megapixel sensor, and then having very strong speculars and contrast in the background, and then certain colors can affect the lens. That's when you start to see the defects in the lens, right? And then, of course, obviously, autofocusing speed is not going to be anywhere near a pro lens, no matter what mount it is, and on and on and on. But given the current technology of lenses and manufacturing today, there is a inverse relationship between the size of the lens and the quality of the output that lens can produce, right? So if you want a super high quality pin razor sharp lens with no defects, that's going to be a huge lens. Okay. Uh, because Lord knows, you've seen the pancake lenses. Like I have a 28 millimeter f2.8 pancake lens this thick, you know, uh, produces great results, but there are defects in it, which I probably talked about in my review. But if you look at my review of the 28 millimeter f2.8 pancake lens, it's a Brighton Star, fabulous lens, excellent build quality, yada yada. But there are defects, right, that you have to be aware of that were made, compromises were made to make the lens that small. Okay. Well, I go on, man, I get on these like long things and I lose my place. Uh But I think the point here is that spending more money doesn't mean getting better quality, right? So you have to do your due diligence and make sure you're getting the best value. Uh, and David says, Rob is going to say the 300 millimeter. I had the 100 400 and recently bought the 150 to 600. I kept the 100 to 400 and think for the money it's very good. Yep, I would agree with that. And Ed says, I loved, so that's past tense. It started to get that infamous problem, fixed it twice, but now it's abandoned. Long live the M1 Mark II that I bought a few weeks ago. Awesome. Still miss the M5 too. What's the infamous problem? I think someone mentioned something about the power switch going bad, but I don't use mine that much, but it's still running like brand new. So this question probably already came up, but I just woke up. So type sensors on it. Uh, and hi Rob, I noticed the M1 Mark II firmware 3.6, the file time of the images are 4 hours off the correct time saved in the exit data. Anybody experienced this on other cameras or not? Honestly, I don't pay attention anymore to the dates in the camera. I mean, I will sync them to my phone so that I get accurate time on the camera. So my answer would be I haven't noticed because I intentionally don't pay attention to dates, the file dates of the things. Because when I import the images into my uh, system, I import them into a very specific folder, sometimes by date. Even if I took the pictures last week, I put them into specific folders and not always necessarily by date. So I almost don't care what the file date is on the camera in the image itself. It so yeah, sorry, I haven't noticed it. I mean, I will say I have noticed that it's been years since I really paid attention. I did notice there were time differences though. Uh, why does it say it was taken at 6 a.m. instead of, 12 p.m. like when I actually took it? Because it might be set to GMT 0. But I thought the Olympus cameras have a GMT adjustment. I don't know. Sorry. But ultimately it's not important, right? The time and date. Uh Depending on how you catalog or save your images, it really shouldn't be that important. And Walter, how you doing? Well, I need to give you that trigger here pretty soon. They're starting to ship the Olympus versions. It hasn't come out yet, so I'm gonna buy the Olympus version of that trigger. But every autofocus system has settings to fine-tune performance by case. The Z9 critics initially bashed the AF. They didn't learn it. Those who learned it had exceptional results. Yeah, exactly. You have to learn the system. Like I said, I'm getting a feel for Sony now, but it's user error for the most part if I miss focus. Just I have to jump back because the chat section jumped around. The S9's pricing is certainly a muck. I reckon it'll be discounted fairly soon. I hope so. I mean, just for the general public, you know. Uh, but if it's gonna sell like hot, like I think the frickin' X100 VI or X106 is way overpriced for what it is. I can get an XT5 for the same price as a X100V, and it's a much better camera in my opinion. So who knows? It's all going to depend on, the market really. And Laura says, "Can you video your classes?" Oh, it wouldn't work well. It'd probably be okay as a live stream, but recording it and then trying to edit it and post it, I don't know. I'll give that some thought. Because the way I do the classes is I set up multiple cameras, and I have a projector so that you can see the back of the screen on my camera. You can see sometimes the settings on my flash because I have another camera pointed on the flash trigger. And then I have a projector projecting, the images that I take while I'm in the class, and all of those would not show up well in the video. Uh, if I was going to do that, I'd have to give some thought. There's a lot of overhead when you're making a video. So if I'm trying to do a live class and make video at the same time, it just kind of doubles the workflow to make sure everything goes right. So I'll give that some thought, though. It's a good idea. But if you watch like Gavin Hoey uh, live streams, he does the best job, and for teaching flash and lighting, for doing live classes. But he has everything set up and he has assistants, right? I'm just one man band. I'm going to be standing there and I have to operate all the gear. It's hard. It would be hard. It would be hard for me to do a video if I had assistants and everything that were competent, like knew how to do editing and connecting and splicing video together, like live, right, with switch boxes, etc. Like he has. I could probably live stream a class, but yeah, it's a lot of overhead if you don't have any help. But I'll give that some thought. I'll give it some thought. Maybe I can figure out a solution that would make it at least watchable, whether it's live or video. And then Lysippus says using DxO Pure. Oh, sorry. Uh, and then Ron, I didn't read your question. Well, on these lenses, you are forced to pay MSRP. They don't go on sale very often. The 75 to 300 does sometimes, but you're talking full RS. Yeah, my answer is the same. 75 to 300 is the best value. And then 300 f4. Skip the other two. See, that's the answer Robin would have given. I mean, short and concise, right? What did I do? Did I rant for like 30 minutes on that question? But yeah, okay. I was about to do it again and talk about it, but I'm not. And same thing here, A7C2. Why can't I just give a nice short and concise answer? A7C2 is a nice all-around camera, but you'll get better lenses for less money on the L mount. That's the short answer. That's the Robin Wong answer, right? Short and concise. Ugh. I'm just not a short and concise guy. Uh and speaking of Lumix lenses, I just picked up the 15. Yeah, I want that lens. I mean, I've had that in my shopping cart 100 times, but I've never pulled the trigger. Backup storage doesn't have to be expensive. Drives are cheap. I keep 3 copies of my primary drive. I've had 2 drives fail at once. Phew, man. You can do it. That's how I do it. I have 2 drives. I don't do 3. Like I said, my photography is not that important, right? But uh, I have 2 drives that are basically backups to each other for everything. And And then sharpening relies on strength, radius, threshold. Use smaller radius for fine detail images. Adjust strength to the lowest number necessary. Yeah, that's in the editing. This Walter, he was asking about Pure Raw 4, which doesn't have sliders and things. It has presets, off, standard, high, something like that. It doesn't have sliders. So that's kind of why I went into the detail about sharpness. Um, and Pucho is here from New York City. Is the image processor in the camera responsible for RAW to JPEG conversion? Yes. Um, it is. It is. Yeah. It takes the raw image because it has to process the raw image to save it, and then uh, if you want to save it as JPEG, the processor does that too. So theoretically, this is why it's better to shoot at higher ISO in camera if you need the image to be brighter, because the camera is processing the raw data directly. Uh, so ultimately, you should get a cleaner image with less noise rather than using this is a whole. I'm not even answering the question you asked, but this is why it's better to shoot at higher ISO than to use slower shutter speeds, for example. And then Michael says, is BIF possible with the 100 400 or not really worth it? Yeah, it's definitely possible. I don't think I can put the price for a 300 f4 one. So you zoom out, get a wider view to spot the bird, then you can zoom in on it and track it by eye. You don't even need bird detect, right? Um, so yeah, definitely 100 to 400 is way better for BIF. Once you, like I said, but once you develop your skill set, like if I see a bird in the sky, I can just put my 300 f4 and almost always get it in frame, you know, because it just comes with practice. But it's definitely easier with a 100 to 400, no question. Just like bird detect makes BIF easier on the OM1 than EM1 Mark III. But ultimately, it's all a crutch, right? No, there's no substitute for skill set. And hi, Rob. I picked up an old Nikkor 50mm 1.4 prime and converted to M43, and I don't mind the manually focusing. And this full frame lens on my M43 produced great film-like results. What is your? I guess you're going to ask me. Oh, here it is. What are your opinion? If you don't mind manually focusing, go for it. Uh, there's some, the old lenses, they use old lens technology, so they're going to have a lot of defects in the lens, optically speaking. So the ultimately, this is what gives the lens character, right? In this case, like this film-like character, right? Because these are film lenses, and they didn't have to be tack sharp. Even if they tried to make them tack sharp, it was very hard to do uh, back then, given the lens technology that they had. So, and what improvements have they made, right? They've made improvements. Basically, they have computer aided design now, so they can make more corrections in the computer before they actually manufacture the lens and test it, right? Visually, is this lens sharper? And then the coatings are a big deal. Spherical lenses, I don't know when the first one came out, but it hasn't been out that long, like, since the '60s. I think Leica was the first one to make an aspherical lens, but it didn't come more commonplace until much later. But if aspherical lenses, but anyway, yeah, I love using, uh, vintage glass. I'm actually using, some of my OM uh, OM vintage glass, OM mount film camera lenses on my Sony, and they're coming out great. So, one of the best lenses I ever used was the Olympus Pen F film camera lens on my Olympus Pen F. That was really cool, right? And that produced some very vintage looking images straight out of camera. So definitely go for it. Now, if you're looking to save money be- by buying old glass because you want that focal length, right? You're not looking for character or creative reasons. That's what I did in the beginning is I looked for the sharpest, best manual focus lenses because I just didn't have the money to buy autofocus lenses back then. I said I can get all these focal lengths, manually focus, and save a bunch load of money, right? So that's why I got into it. That is not necessary as much anymore because if you just want a manual focus lens and save a bunch of money, Seven Artisans, TT Artisans, they have a great selection of manual focus lenses that are excellent and they're cheap, cheaper than buying vintage lenses. Uh, and they're optically very, very good, but will still have some character because at that price point, they can't do all of the lens technology that I talked about, right? So uh, there's no need to buy vintage lenses if you just want a particular focal length and you're not worried about the creative reasons for a lens. Just buy one of the new Seven Artisans or TT Artisans. Then you don't have to worry about mold and fungus and oil on the blades, all these different things that happens to old lenses. Uh, discoloration in some cases of the radioactive ones. On and on and on. Uh, Because it used to be getting vintage glass was a great way to get a focal length at a great price. But I don't think that's the case anymore since all these Chinese manufacturers. This is my new thing, trying out vintage manual primes on my EM5. Yeah. No, it's awesome. I used to do it all the time. I still do time to time. Thank you. They are pretty cheap used in Japan. Oh, okay, good. Don't mind shooting midday. And then Tony or David Tellett says, I have 4-hour issue too. I attribute it to my Linux system. It happens on all my file imports. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Dave. When we were talking about the time difference, it probably has to do with the GMT, right? Because I think we're in a GMT -4, -5 here, something like that. Uh, when Tony heaps praise on MFT lens, you know it's something special. Yeah, he did have nice things to say about the 150 to 400. I remember that. Uh, Rob Trey, you've got me one in LX 102, but dang, those things are still pricey. I know, right? They want like $900 to $1,000 for an LX 100 Mark II. I'm not paying that. That's what they cost brand new. I'd rather go and out. Okay, let's talk about the Deluxe 8. I'd rather pay full price of a Nike like a Deluxe 8 than pay new prices on a used LX 100 Mark II. It that irritates me to no end. That should be a $500 or less, that camera. That should not be a freaking $1,000 camera at this point in time, being 5, 6 years old, however old it is. So we have this one. This is the LX 100 Mark II. It's in this is David's camera, by the way. It's in this beautiful leather case. Uh, Basically, from everything I can see, is that uh the Leica Delux 8 is basically this camera in terms of sensor and processor, autofocus, you know, functionally the same. Technically very, very similar. I doubt there's going to be effect on it because I've seen the specs that they released and they didn't mention phase detect. I guarantee if it had phase detect on it, they would have mentioned it on the specs for pre-ordering. But I didn't see phase detect. This also has 15-minute record limits in 4K. By the way, 30 minutes. I posted a lot of images on my Flickr page from this camera now, and I have an album dedicated to shots that I took with this camera. Now, they're mediocre images, but it'll give you an idea of the kind of sharpness that you can get from this camera. Let me go over here. So we go to albums. Oops. Albums. Lumix. Okay, so I only got 19 photos in here now. But you know, there's one. And these are full res, right? You can just punch in and see all of the detail. Of course, pictures of Ellie. And these are ones I took yesterday. But yeah, this is a good example, right? I mean, the problem I was having, and I saw another question. Let me go back. Yeah, I'm having a hard time though. I would have an LX like my own, not one I'm just borrowing. If they were closer to 500, you can get the Mark I version for that price, and it's virtually the same, but that camera is even older than the Mark II camera. That's the same thing. So I think Marco had this question. Can you do a quick size comparison? My EM5 III is not here, but they're very, very similar. Here's the LX100. What's the best way to show this on camera? Maybe full screen. Let me switch to that. Okay. So is it going to focus? So you can see clearly because of the hump, the Stylus 1S is taller. It's a little bit wider, and it's but it's a little bit thinner, I think, overall. So if I put these like this, it's a little bit thinner when it's all shut down. When the lenses are extended, they're about the same, right? But it looks like they're virtually exactly the same width. And then here's the bottom. So the grip actually looks a little thicker on the LX. Well, no, it's thicker here, but so relatively speaking, this is because it's not as tall. Ultimately, this camera is smaller because it's not as tall as because it doesn't have this hump. That's the only thing that makes this camera bigger. But the key advantage to this camera is this tilt screen. This is huge. Being able to tilt the screen like this, because if you look at some of the photos I took, where's my mouse? Like, yeah, like this one, this plant, this mushroom. Man, what a pain in the butt without a tilt screen to take shots like this, right? And the LX100 has the close-up focusing on it too. So, but the M5 Mark III is just a hair bigger than this camera. It's thicker because of the grip on the M5 Mark III, just a little bit, but they're pretty much the same size. So this camera, this 1S, is the same size as the M5 Mark III, save for the lens. I have my M5 Mark III. It's kind of like all mounted and everything. It would take some time to tear it down. And to me, it's very artistic and creative form of photography where I use manual vintage lenses for portrait and macro. I'm experimental and don't mind manual focus. Yep. Yeah, so just buy vintage lenses. Don't buy the Chinese stuff, right? You'll definitely get more character out of an actual vintage lens because it's going to have the additional defects in it that a Chinese lens wouldn't. Uh, it's probably nice to have something you do that isn't recorded for once. Hmm, that's an interesting idea. Um, and a live, oh wow, going back, a live stream could be great. Maybe, maybe. I would have to have, maybe David Crooks can do it. If we set up Flash, a class on Flash photography, honestly, it's probably better just to watch Gavin Hoey than watch my live stream on Flash photography. But if I do, because Gavin does a lot of live stream, but I'd be different than Gavin in some ways. I'd go into a little bit more detail. Gavin goes pretty fast like this, right? But if you watch one of Gavin Hoey's live streams for Flash, you'll learn a lot. And he's a lot of fun to watch. And then I'd have to get permission from everybody in the room to be live. I don't know, it's tricky. If it was me by myself and a model and maybe one other person managing the stream, that would work. Um, you guys are talking about time zones. I can't speak to that because I just ignore a lot of times the date. I mean, sometimes I'll name the file the date, you know, today's date, not necessarily. So Marco says, why is the LX102 listed as 17 megapixel camera when it's got a 20 megapixel sensor? Does something weird? No, it's not a digital crop. It's an actual, well, it is digital crop, basically. Uh, but I'll try and do a video on it. You know, it wouldn't take me long to do a video on it, but the LX100 has this aspect ratio switch on it, right? So I can do 1 by 1, 4 by 3, 3 by 2, 16 by 9, I think. Yeah. So with this switch here, I can switch the aspect ratio, but it's doing it in a different way. So like a normal 4 by 3, micro four thirds sensor, like an Olympus camera, you can set the aspect ratio in the super control panel. Say you want to shoot 16 by 9, you're basically digitally chopping off the top and the bottom so that you get the aspect ratio. Whereas this camera, it doesn't, it does digitally crop, but it's a little bit different that it can take advantage of more pixels on the sensor rather than cutting them off. You still lose pixels, but not as many as you would if you do it the way Olympus does it. So I'll have to make a video on it because it's hard to explain. But ultimately, if you are going to use different aspect ratios, you'll get more megapixels out of this camera than you will with an Olympus camera for F4 micro four thirds, the 4:3 aspect ratio. If you're going to shoot 4:3 all the time, you'll get 20 megapixels on Olympus. If you're going to shoot 4:3 all the time on this camera, you're only going to get 17 megapixels because of the way it crops. But if you were to do, what's one of the choices, 3:2, theoretic, because yeah, that's been bugging me back in my mind as well. Uh, are those aftermarket caps? I assume you mean, yeah, these are aftermarket. I think yeah, JJC, if that comes up. JJC makes it. You can find these. I think they're 20 bucks. I don't know about this one. This one might be native. I think the lens cap on this might be native. I'm not sure exactly about this one. Maybe David Tellett, you can answer that because this is your camera. uh, just did my first work trip with the Stylus 1S I repaired. Hard to beat the versatility of the lens on the 1S, but I do wish it had more resolution. Yeah, because it's only 12, right? 12 megapixels, maybe 10. Uh, is there a way to create as in-camera aspect ratio like 4:5? Not to the raw files. You can always do it to JPEGs. There's in the super control panel or in the menu, you can go in and select an aspect ratio. I don't think 4:5 is one of, unfortunate. So the short answer is no, you can't do 4:5. Uh, what I've seen, 3:2, 16:9, 1:1. I've never seen 5:4 or 4:5. I don't think that's an option, unfortunately. Because if Marco has it too, then very likely it was native. Because a lot of times when you see these for sale, the LX100, uh, they are not, they don't all have this lens cap. But I don't think I've ever seen a 1S without it. Um, but yeah, so a couple other things about the LX100 is, just like I was saying earlier, um, you have to develop like a familiarity with your camera and lens, a relationship with your camera and lens. And I'm now starting to get there with this camera. So right now we're just friends, right? We're friends, but I wasn't crazy about the first images that I started taking with it. And initially I thought it was, just the lens quality or something was bothering me about the images. But as I started using this, and I still have a long way to go in learning about this camera, but as I started using it, I started to get a feel for the autofocusing, the focal length that I want to use, working without a tilt screen, all those things, right? Of handling this camera, trying to get some decent images for it. I'm getting there to where I really enjoy shooting with this camera, um, even without the tilt screen. But what was bothering me initially about the images was it turned out to be the color science. And I'm talking about the raw images. So fortunately, you can change it. So I developed a profile to correct the colors. I developed my own profile for it to correct the colors. And whether you do it as presets or you can do it to create a DCP file, there's lots of ways you can make your own LUTs or color in raw files when you're editing raw images. So I finally got it, created something, and now the colors I'm very content with. So uh, if you go to my Flickr page and look at the images, like anything that's color, finally, I'm very, very content with the color. I like the blues and the yellows here, you know, the yellows and reds and greens in this image. All the tones, the different, this is a little more complex color palette, but it's kind of pastel-y, right? Um, this is a very straightforward, realistic. This one's a little bit green. I need to fix this. But you know, black and white, of course. But yeah, it took me a bit. Uh, like this image here, this one is finally at a point to where I'm fairly content with it. But yeah, the colors were off just slightly. Just slightly. The reds were less saturated. The blues were also toned back a bit. The yellows and oranges were shifted a little bit too yellow or green. They were just very, very minor things with the raw images. The standard JPEG pretty much reflected what the raw image was doing. The natural style JPEG was pretty much spot on. I like the natural style JPEGs in this camera, but I rarely use the JPEGs. I always process my RAWs now. So when I was raw processing, I had to make my own DCP profile. And I'm gonna try and do a review on this camera, and once I get that done, I'm gonna give that profile away for free. Uh, if you have an LX100, I haven't perfected it yet. Otherwise, I would just give it to you now. But uh, once I kind of get the color profile to look the way I want it, then I can give it to you, right? I can say you can just download it here if you want to try it. If you had the same issue I did with the LX100, in that for whatever reason, you just don't like the images you're getting from that camera. And that's what it turned out to be for me, was the color science coming from the raw images were off. So that's why I'm curious to see what the Leica Deluxe 8 is going to do. I'm so tempted on that camera. Fortunately, I got a couple of months, I guess, before it actually is released, and I'm going to get gas. But I'm gonna have to think about. Maybe I'll dump my Sony or Fuji and get the Leica. That would be a pretty bold move on my part, but we'll see. Um, but okay, I don't see any other questions or comments, so maybe I'll call it here because I've been on for a couple hours at least. So thanks everyone for coming in today. I greatly appreciate your support, and uh, for being here and hanging out with me. It's always a lot of fun. Hopefully, I was able to give you guys some good information, or at least you know what my opinion is on things. Today, I'm trying to be a half glass full kind of guy. So, you guys have a great rest of your Sunday. Have a great week. And I will be back on Tuesday for a photo editing stream. So, if you have any images, you can support those too, or submit those, and I'll edit them live. So you guys have a great day. Thanks for coming in today.